once again, we're going to be talking about another aspect of risk management that's become a more prevalent issue in recent times, and that is the business value of meetings. And what I'm going to present to you here is actually a presentation from Meeting Professionals International, and I want to give you some of the perspective of what's being done with regards to dealing with this risk issue that's become a big factor. In 2009, the industry had what was called the perfect storm, when everything started to fall apart economically. The thing that really is the catalyst to it had to do with a meeting being held in Laguna Niguel, California, where one of the financial institutions that was given a bailout from the U.S. government held a very expensive incentive meeting, and everything went crazy from there in terms of the whole aspect of trying to depict meetings as an expensive aspect. And you know, it's surfacing again. There was a recent news clip on the U.S. news just in the last week where they were talking about Muffingate, and Muffingate was the Capitol Hilton charged a meeting $16 per blueberry muffin. But, you know, that really didn't tell the whole story. The hotel came back and said, look, that wasn't just for a muffin, that was for a whole coffee break, turning coffee and juice and so on. And, you know, you're employing people and all the other things associated with it. Well, that's part of the reason why the meeting industry has become much more concerned about this. It hasn't been as much of an issue in Asia, but it certainly can and will be, and it affects us because of the people who come here from North America and Europe along those lines. Okay, and that wasn't the only thing. Businesses found new opportunities to virtual meetings, which we're going to talk about more at the last half of the semester here, or last third of the semester, and they started questioning the even value of in-person meetings. So what this study is about that MPI was behind was kind of trying to get to what the point is of what meetings are really all about. An Oxford economics study found that that businesses made $12.50 for every dollar they spent traveling. And companies would lose 28% of their business and 70% of their profits if they eliminated business travel. In other words, the business traveler is the person going out and creating the business for the organization through sales, marketing aspects, attending meetings, and so on. So the challenge is, what's a meeting actually worth? What's the business's bottom line? And that's where the challenge comes in to our meetings. Sorry, to make sure I get all my tools in order here. So the research that MPI did was on 259 decision makers in 215 different countries, 15 to 45 minute interviews. So it's a very extensive survey in terms of this process. I was one of the people, I believe they interviewed one of those 5% in Asia, because they did talk to me about this a little bit. You see the breakdown here, mostly US and Europe, because that's where the issue was predominantly being focused. So the dilemma that we're facing here is, how do we track the return on investment for our meetings? And here's the challenge. There's many different evaluation levels, and this slide is not showing up effectively on here, so please consult your note for that, because it's missing the left side, and the left side's important, so I'm going to refer over to my notes on the left side here a moment. And what we're talking about here is we're talking about reaction and planned actions. Okay, so the reaction and planned actions, oh, I see, it's on here, it just doesn't show it as broken down the same way. So you measure the participant satisfaction. I mean, that's one way to look at the level of return on investment. Learning measures, you look at whether people came away feeling they got knowledge and skills. Application, those are like in-job behaviors and things that people did and implemented as a result of that meeting, the changes they did. Business impact might be those kind of changes that happened to the business as a result of that. Maybe they changed direction or they changed their strategy. And then there are some who actually measure a return on investment, how much the organization spent versus how much they got back. So let's say we had a sales meeting. What we're saying is, we're going to spend X amount of dollars for that meeting. How much increased sales do we expect to have from that? 10%, 15%, whatever it might be in the process. So we're setting some kind of objectives on there. Again, this slide doesn't show up very well on here. I'm not sure why that's true, but you have it in front of you. And what this really shows here is this chain from looking at it at a very simple, this is really saying the value of the meeting in terms of whether the customers are satisfied is the very bottom level. And you should be very familiar with this. This is an important concept. Okay, what do you want to track in order to know how valuable your meeting is? Well, attendee satisfaction is one, learning new skills and so on. But up to really the pinnacle is what the actual dollars spent were, and the return that actually came back. And I think that the key is here, the industry is focusing more on the latter parts today because of the economic situation, political pressure, and so on in the industry. Oh, I see. It's going to show you in terms of oh, I get it. Sorry about that. Now you got it, that it was different levels to different levels, and it went through the slides on that basis. So if you look at other methods of looking at the way they found in terms of the way businesses value their meetings, there were those who looked at it from a financial perspective, some that looked at it from an educational perspective, how much they gained from it, others by satisfaction. Some of it was logistical. In other words, the meeting was a success because we got most of our attendees there at the right times and it ended at the right times, and the typical meeting logistic kind of questions. And then cultural, we learned from each other because we did it in a different place, in a different area, and so on. So the ROI method that MPI is really proposing, and I go along with this, I think is a good one. So first you develop what your objectives are for your meeting, the objectives and the solutions. Then you develop an evaluation plan for it. You collect the data, and then after collecting the data, you look for a solution to actually impact it, so to implement it. So you're looking at that level 4 business impact. You're trying to get to that point in time. If you look backwards and you see, well, if you're just looking at satisfaction, that comes in at point number 3 instead of all the way over at the final aspect. So if you look at the continuum there, ultimately to collect data after a solution and implement that in terms of the process means that you have to go to a level 4. So if you say, all right, then isolate the effects, convert the data into monetary value, tabulate, as you see at the top, tabulate the cost, calculate the return on investment, and generate an impact study. Okay, these are the ultimate final stages. Once you've gathered to level 4, if you want to get to level 5, you really need to convert it into monetary terms. That's the real key to what this says. So you should be familiar with this process. What happens along the way? You should be able to write something if you were asked about that in the future as to how you would depict each of these areas and what they would be related to a specific meeting, for example. Now, they find that a lot of people imply a business value of their meetings. So they presume that it has a value, and therefore they don't really measure it. I mean, that's why they don't go about looking at it. The meeting is known to be valuable because everybody says it's valuable. They don't they think in the last term there, what they're saying is they think it's valuable because they lowered the cost of the meeting and therefore it became more valuable. And those are all points about logistics and all nice kind of things, but they don't give you a real value to that meeting. They don't really put it into place. And who measures it? Well, only a small percentage actually measure business value. That's what they found out. Large events intend to produce more. Immediate and near-term sales are the most often measured. That's what they found to be the most in terms of that. But most are inferred ROI. The most common approach is that it's assumed that a meeting contributes to the overall profitability. The success of conducting a meeting is measured by non-financial terms to validate that. The CEO felt good about the fact that he interacted and networked with his various constituents and so on within the company, with the employees. Or the logistics were good and everything worked out, again, like I said, in terms of the meeting professional's point of view. So how to avoid these kinds of issues is don't use inference for ROI and not measure it. You know, that's the challenge, and MPI is challenging people out there to go out and find valid measures as to actually what those valid measures are in the process of things. And in order to we're saying that there are certain situations out there where there is the market makers, people that are going out there and feeling, well, we're already ahead of the game, so we don't really need to measure it because you know, our organization is the leading marketing organization. You know, these are looked at as required events. We have to have an annual meeting, so therefore we don't have to actually measure it. And sometimes we're looking at like preventative measures in order to make sure that you know, people don't look at the overall value of the meetings in terms of the process of things. So how do we set an effective strategy? Well, we have to clearly define what the objectives are and the expectations. We have to find appropriate measures, and then we have to gather the information used to evaluate that meeting. So what to avoid? Objectives that can't be practically measured. The measures that don't apply to the objectives and unused data. In other words, we don't want to collect things that aren't important, but we want to measure what we're supposed to measure and what really shows the meeting value. We have to recognize the opportunities, though, that, you know, meetings are optional for organizations and that they can be expensive. And, you know, what is the definable purpose and who's supposed to do that? It's not the planner, most likely. This is going to be someone on the team or the part of the organization that's holding that meeting. The marketing organization, the sales organization, the financial part of the organization, they're the ones that have to define that, not the planner themselves. So the opportunities are, well, okay, let's look at some monthly sales update for possible meetings. Okay, that might be a way to look at it. Customer tours, educational conferences, team building events, department meetings, strategy, brainstorming sessions. All of these are methods to put together how do we determine where these are. What can we find out from others in terms of how we are going to measure this? What's the return on investment? So the premise is the company's best interest is to become dependent on practical measures in order to actually know what their value of their meeting is. So why do we measure it? Well, we measure it because we need to validate it. We need to make sure that someone knows that we looked at why we were holding this and justify why we're holding it. Waste reduction. You know, why hold things that aren't supposed to be, that aren't valuable? So we need to look at that too. So, and we need to improve our outcomes, and we have to be able to, as we do in education today, as you see today, we have assessments and learning outcomes for every subject. You know, we're focused on that. We're saying take those same kind of things to the business meeting aspect of it, and make sure that you maintain the relevance. You know, meetings can become outdated because they just keep doing the same thing over and over again. So you have to constantly be looking at what kind of things can be done. So it can be done, right? That's the premise. It can be done. And you need to get stakeholder commitment. You have to improve your relevance to them, a better experience, lower cost, price, all of those factors there. Tell a better story, be more accountable. All these kind of things are why you need to do it. Stakeholders out there need to know. Your members of associations, your employees within the organization, all of them need to be aware of why it is that you're holding these meetings and what you're doing. So you start off objectives and expectations. You know, every worthwhile meeting has to have an objective. You know, consider that from the standpoint of the owner of the meeting, whatever department or organization that is, the attendees, the sponsors, the planner themselves, the media, the press, associated departments. All the people have some kind of expectations involved in terms of where that meeting is